Hi, Mzansi. You are listening to Farmers Inside Track, proudly brought to you by Food for Mzansi. I am Patricia Tembo, and this episode is set to be informative and practical as we welcome MJ Nunes, who is the owner and director of Sable Creek Farms. We're going to be exploring ways to optimize aquaponics systems with MJ's expertise in this area. MJ, welcome to Farmers Inside Track. We're excited to have you on the show, and for our listeners who have not heard of you, may you please just give us a brief background of who you are and what you do in the agri space?
Hi, Patricia. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you guys as well and tell you a bit about myself and what we do. So I've always been in the farming background. My grandparents were chicken farmers, and I've always found a love for farming and a passion for farming. It's been in my blood, in our family, since I was a young little boy. I used to grow huge vegetable patches in our backyard, and I used to have fish. And so when the time came, I combined the two together, and then aquaponics came across the line. So having the two things that I used to like the most while growing up in a system together, benefiting each other, it was just amazing for me. So I took it and I ran with it. So dream that has come true, but trying to make true in a bigger way as well. So yeah.
Lovely. The work you're doing is actually really wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, MJ. And for our listeners, on our website, we have a whole feature article of MJ. So please go check out his story after this podcast. But let's get right into the topic of discussion, optimizing aquaponic systems. MJ, what made you choose to focus on aquaponic farming?
We've always had a bit of a situation regarding water in South Africa, and it's been going on for quite a long time. Aquaponics is a farming technique where we farm fish and fresh produce together in a system where both of them benefit each other. With this system, we recirculate the water because it's a closed system. That means we save about 95% water compared to traditional or other farming techniques. We have about a 5% loss of water with regards to condensation or transpiration and so forth. But the main thing is saving water. But there's a few other factors that are involved in why I chose aquaponics. It's 100% organic. We can't use any chemicals or fertilizers or pesticides, herbicides, because if we have that contact with water that goes through the system, it can kill our fish. So that is one of the ways that we prove that aquaponics is organic. The other thing is that it's chemical-free produce that you're getting out of the system. I said in my interview with you last time that fresh produce shouldn't last longer than 3 to 4 weeks on a shelf. Then you can definitely see that there's chemicals and fertilizers and harsh chemicals and fertilizers involved in the growth process of the produce. So, for instance, lettuce should only last about a week and a half on the shelf, chemical-free lettuce. You know that you're putting something in your body that can't harm you. Chemicals is a thing that really has a problem with our health and with human health. And we should start looking at getting away from chemicals. Start rather farming organic and having organic produce. Health is very, very valuable in my eyes. There's a lot of people that agree with me.
That is true. It's quite important to be responsible in how we produce our food. And looking more at the aquaponics system itself, what are the key factors that contribute to its success? Because we know farmers are looking to make a livelihood from the farming, not just necessarily to feed the household. So what would you say are the key factors to have a successful aquaponics system?
Aquaponics has two forms of income. If you look at it that way, you've got fish and you've got your produce. If you're looking at doing it at a commercial size or look at doing it commercially, there are two forms of income that you can get from aquaponics. The fish market is quite new still. Regarding tilapia, people know trout more. Talking about the tilapia market, it is quite new still, but we are getting there. There is a lot of potential for the tilapia market for growing it. The other thing is fresh produce. Your produce in aquaponics grows about, I would say, 2 times quicker than growing in the soil. So your turnaround time for your produce from seed to harvest is much quicker than traditional farming or other farming techniques. The other thing is that aquaponics production cost to produce your produce and your fish is much lower than farming in soil or traditional farming methods, which means that your price for your organic produce doesn't have to be sky high because it's got the name organic. you can keep it the same price. You'll still make more profit than your normal soil farming because your production cost is much lower. There's no fertilizers, there's no chemicals, there's nothing used in the process of that. For instance, lettuce from seedling to harvest date. There's no harsh chemicals, no expensive fertilizers used to produce it till harvest. If you're looking at doing it in a smaller setup, for instance, backyard or a bit of a smaller size, you're cutting out on buying chemical grown produce in the shops. You're growing it in your backyard for yourself. So you're cutting costs on that as well. Yes, the startup cost is a bit expensive, but it definitely pays itself back after a certain amount of time, depending on how you're looking at doing it commercially or just as a hobby.
It sounds like you actually reap more out of it than what you initially invest. It's just a matter of time. So you mentioned how aquaponics has two components to it. And of course, the fish part of it is freshwater fish. Is that correct? So you've got your tilapia. With the fresh produce, are there any specific produce crop that do better in aquaponics systems?
There certainly are different types of crops that do extremely well in aquaponics. Herbs do extremely well. Lettuces do extremely well. You can just as well actually grow anything in aquaponics. The main thing is you need to choose your crop correctly. If you're going to put one greenhouse up for commercial aquaponics, I wouldn't recommend planting spinach. The reason for that is you need a lot of spinach to be able to make a profit or make it worth your while for planting spinach. Because spinach needs a huge area to be able to make at least a profit out of that area. So I would focus on niche things more like herbs, edible flowers, lettuces, and tomatoes do extremely well. Peppers do well, chilies do well in the system. So we've tried all of it and it does extremely well. If you're looking at doing 4 greenhouses and doing spinach, then I would say yes, it's worth it.
Well, aquaponics, it's in the name, aqua. So we have to touch on the water aspect of it. How do you approach water quality and ensuring that the nutrient availability both for the fish and or the crop that you're cultivating?
When we install a system or when we put our system up, we used borehole water. So what's done is we have our water sent away and it's tested and analysis is done on the water. When the results come back, then we take it from there. A lot of the times, if the borehole water isn't compatible for using, we do tend to check pH levels as well as total dissolved solid levels, which is your TDS levels. Your TDS has to be a certain amount or certain level to be able to be safe for the aquaponic system. So if it's not safe, what we do is we make use of reverse osmosis systems where the water first goes through there and then after that it is usable for our aquaponic system. So pH is also a very, very important parameter that we have to check in aquaponics. It is one of our biggest conductors of nutrients in the system. So that is what carries our nutrients from where it comes out from the fish towards the plants. So our pH levels are actually very, very important. We do use buffers here and there to be able to sort that pH level out if it's too high or too low, but it's all natural buffers that we use to set our optimal pH for the system.
You mentioned TDS. Just for our listeners who are not familiar with aquaponics, what are you referring to when you say TDS? If you can just explain that.
TDS stands for total dissolved solids. So when you have a borehole, sometimes you have some solids, minerals and solids that are in that water that aren't safe for human consumption. Even on the back of your bottle of water, you'll see sometimes it says pH level and then it will say what pH it is, or it will say TDS level. And it will show you your TDS level, which makes it safe for you to drink. That's why it's stated at the back of a bottle of water. So it has an influence. We have to check certain TDS levels when we do installations, or when we install our system, we had to check our TDS. It has an influence on the whole system and for human consumption. So TDS is very, very important also to check. But we can change the parameters of the water through reverse osmosis, so that it is safe for human consumption and human use. So yeah.
And still on the topic of waste management, how do you approach that in, I guess, monitoring ammonia levels, nitrate levels? How do you go about waste management in an aquaponic system?
We don't actually have problems in our systems regarding overproduction of nitrites, overproduction of ammonia in the system, because we work with ratios in our system. So our systems, when we build them or when we design them that they consist of certain ratios. So a certain size will be able to only take a certain amount of fish due to how much filtration we've got in the system for the fish. That's the most important thing. And through that, having the ratios, we don't struggle too much with overproduction of ammonia, nitrates, and nitrites. It only happens if there is ever a problem in the system regarding natural causes or anything. But if your ratios are in place, then it's a very successful system. No overproduction of poisonous or toxic waste in the system.
We should touch a bit on disease and controlling that. The two components again, managing plant disease as well as the fish part. How do you go about that?
So we do have strict disease management control here in our greenhouse, and we also tell people that do buy systems from us that we've installed to please take the precautions that we give them to do. So sanitation is a big thing. If I go to a fish farm today and go into my greenhouse again, I could be bringing something in through my shoes. So what we do is we've got footbaths in front of each greenhouse. We've got sanitation areas in front of each greenhouse where we sanitize our hands. Things like tobacco mosaic virus can be given to not only tomatoes, but to peppers as well. So even someone that smokes, if they come into the greenhouse and they perhaps touch one of our plants, it can have a big effect on the system. So that's why we're quite strict on sanitation and so forth. Another thing is with the fish. Fish are prone to disease if the environment isn't healthy for them. So that means filtration. Your filtration needs to be good for your fish. Your temperatures need to be optimal for your fish. Fish are quite a lot like humans. In the winter, they do struggle a bit if they're not kept in optimal temperatures. That's why we make use of fish houses where the temperature is kept at a good temperature for them. Because fish also, like us, we get flu or we get sick in the winter due to the temperatures, cold temperatures. That's why it's called a cold. So fish as well, if the water is too cold or the atmospheric temperature is too cold, they are susceptible to get sicknesses as well. The immune system is more like ours. It's good to keep an eye on them, good to have your management in place regarding fish keeping as well as sanitation when it comes to disease and disease control.
Sounds like you have to be very strict with the biosecurity when it comes to aquaponics. What technologies do you use to make the system more efficient? Because, we're in the fourth industrial revolution. Technology is just a big part of our world. So I'm quite sure in aquaponics that also plays a role. Can you expand on that, please?
Load shedding has and will always be a problem in South Africa into the near future. So fortunately, our systems are very energy efficient, which means on some of our big commercial systems, we run under a kilowatt of electricity. So that's about less than what a kettle boils. So our pumps are small, but they do their work, and plug usage in the systems is minimal. So you don't need big inverters, big solar systems to be able to power a system. So it all comes down to the cost of the installation. You don't need to give a lot of capital out to be able to install a solar system or inverter system to keep the system going. So what we've got in our system is we have a GSM unit, which means it's connected to our electrical unit in the system. If the power does go off after it's changed over to our solar unit, it will then alarm us through a proper alarm to tell us that the power is off, so we can make arrangements regarding what to do to put a generator in or so on. So we do make use of the GSM unit, and then we are busy with a unit now that we want to install into our systems that measure water parameters electronically. We do use normal test kits at the moment. It does quite get expensive because you have to buy new ones. They aren't reusable. So that's why we've decided we want to start using a probe meter to be able to test our water parameters digitally. So we can put it in the water and it will come up on our phone and we'll be able to see what our water parameters are. So we're cutting out costs on test kits as well. So we do make use of quite a bit of technology. A lot of questions I get is, do we use fish feeders, automatic fish feeders? We don't support that. Fish feeder works on a timer, and if your fish are not hungry, it's just going to keep giving food. So we'd like to see our fish are healthy. We would like to give our fish food and see that they're happy, healthy, and eating. If need so be that we need to give them more food, then we give them more food. So it all depends on that, but we do make use of quite a bit of technology, and it must say it does make the operation much easier and more efficient.
With technology, one would think like you don't have to be as hands-on, which is completely false. Like you still obviously need to be very hands-on and observe the fish and the crop as well and observe those things. So I think it's important that you mentioned that. And we touched a bit on the nutrients within the system, but if you could maybe explain nutrient cycling and how it works in an aquaponic system, seeing that you're not necessarily putting in fertilizers or inputs and things like that.
Yes, our fish produce ammonia through their bodies as well as excretion. So ammonia is not what plants absorb. Plants absorb nitrates, which is converted by the fish ammonia by bacteria. So nitrate is a product of ammonia, where it has been converted from ammonia to nitrite and then to nitrate. So that is what plants absorb to help them to grow and have all the micro and macro elements that they need to be a healthy, strong plant. So that's in a nutshell how the nutrient cycle works in aquaponics.
Referring back to diseases, I didn't specifically ask you if there's any diseases that fish or crops are more susceptible to. I know you mentioned, is it the Mozambican tobacco back disease?
Yeah.
But maybe on the fish side as well, are there any diseases that when farming with trout or tilapia that they're more susceptible to?
Yes, now there is quite a few of diseases. There are some quite harsh diseases, but we're lucky to say that we haven't had a case in South Africa recently. So we do have sicknesses that are quite regular that we get in fish that come across more in the colder months, fungus, white spot, and a few other sicknesses that we get. But it's very rare. If your system is kept well going and natural and everything is happy in the system, it's very rare that you'll find a sickness in the system. As I said, fish are very susceptible to colder temperatures. It depends what fish you use. Trout are ones that would like a colder temperature, where tilapia like a warmer temperature. So it all depends on what type of fish you're using, the housing that they're kept in, if all the parameters in the water are correct, and if they're happy. So if your fish are stressed out as well, it's got an influence on their immune system, which makes them susceptible to viruses, sicknesses, and diseases. So there are a few, but very rare. If there are problems in the system, it is possible.
And maybe if we can speak a little bit about ensuring that aquaponic system is sustainable, both environmentally, as you've already touched on, because that part is very, very important. You know, that's important to you as well, specifically, but also in terms of profitability, if you can speak on how to keep it sustainable in that way too.
We do recommend that people come to us or talk to us before starting aquaponics. We've been through all the problems, all the mistakes. We've paid a lot of school fees, as they call it, to be able to fix our aquaponic system and to make it successful. So we are here so that you don't have to make those mistakes. Following normal management of the system, following normal precautions for the system, doing a bit extra, making sure all your things are proper and perfect in line, and making sure that everything is functioning properly is actually the most important thing to be able to have a profitable aquaponic system. Also, going out, doing marketing, finding offset points for your produce is very, very important. Having those things in place and managing it properly is very, very important to make it a profitable business, yes.
And I think to just close off, what valuable lessons have you learned from, running your aquaponics system? Yeah, maybe if you can touch on something maybe we haven't in the podcast that you know is important, yeah.
I've actually learned while doing aquaponics is that nature, don't play with nature. It has its own way of doing things. And if it decides to do this, go with it. Don't play against it. So nature is a beautiful thing. And that's why living with nature, it's a perfect thing. So I have learned water is very, very important. Very, very important. We should be more secure about water. We should be more worried about water. Not worried, but make sure that we're saving water rather than using too much of it. So water is very, very important, and your health is also very important. I've been in the farming industry for some time now, about 8 years, and I've seen what people are spraying, what they're using on crops in traditional farming methods or other techniques. It's really heartbreaking to see what we are actually putting in our bodies by traditional farming methods or farming techniques, which is very, very negative to our health. So I have learned that your health is very valuable. Having chemical-free produce is important, and then also, as well as the system, aquaponics is just another farming technique that ticks all the boxes, covers all the things you need to be healthy, and it's the future. We have to go with it or we have to leave it. So I would say aquaponics has definitely taught me a lot about health, a lot about water, and a lot about nature. it's important for me to be able to teach people how aquaponics works and the benefits of it and how it can benefit you as a person or a business. So that's why we are here, to help people with regards to that.
I quite like that you really emphasize the importance of working with nature. That's something I resonate with very much, and I'm sure quite a lot of our listeners do as well, because once you work against it, it will cost you in more ways than money. And how can our listeners get a hold of you and your business?
People can contact me directly on 076 768 1648. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and we are on TikTok. Our TikTok username is Aquaponics Future Farming. Facebook is Sable Creek Aquaponics, and Instagram is also Sable Creek Aquaponics. They're more than welcome to go and look at our socials, so yes.
Thank you so much to MJ Nunes. For more information on the topic, you can visit www.foodformzansi.co.za. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. From me, Patricia Tembo, our technical producer, Megan van der Vent, and the rest of #team Food for Mzansi. Thank you for listening.